welcome back to our second session. I hope everyone enjoyed their Easter break as much as I did, because I know I definitely needed that little break in between. But I'm glad to see that all of you guys made it here in one piece, and that you guys are refreshed and ready to go, because today we're going to delve right into some verbal SAT topics and techniques that will help you master the section of the SAT that seems to scare a lot of people and to cause a lot of problems. And don't worry, I was completely in that same boat many years back when I first encountered this section of the SAT, because I didn't know the strategies and I didn't know the little tips that could guarantee me that higher score. So get excited, because we're going to share everything we know with you, and trust me, by the end of this session, as well as a couple more, and with more practice, you'll become more confident and this section will be like cake. So get excited for that. But before we start, before we move on, I just want to take a few moments to kind of recap the material that we learned at our last class. Because I believe that the more you're exposed to something, the more that you are reminded of it, the more you use it, it becomes like second nature. And come test day, these skills will be a lot more effective, and you'll be a lot more confident in using them to guarantee that higher score. So bear with me on that part. To start, I can't remind you enough, the SAT test is not a test of knowledge. It's not a test of accumulated knowledge, how well you did on AP English, how much information you can retain from US history. It's not a test of knowledge, it's a test of strategy, it's a test of how well you could take a test. So as confusing as it may sound, you'll kind of get it once you actually practice some techniques with us and you actually learn about what this test is all about. But yeah, what you learned till now is not going to give you that extra leg up. It'll make you more comfortable maybe to know the different topics that are covered on the test, because the test makers like to use day-to-day topics that you would encounter in your daily readings or throughout your high school different classes and things like that. But by no means does that guarantee you a higher test score just because you know more about ballet and more about thermodynamics than someone else. But by knowing the strategies, you're definitely guaranteed a better test score. And that's what we're here for. You've come to the Princeton Review, and we are the best people who've learned to decipher this test, who've learned the different techniques and the different tips on how to be the best SAT test taker. And we've outsmarted the test makers, and the SAT test makers, trust me, are amazing at what they do. They have excelled at trying to trick you, at trying to fool you, to try to make you not do well in this test. And we have analyzed that. We have deciphered their techniques and deciphered their question types, and we have learned of how to make bright students like yourself into amazing test takers. And we have seen results, and we have seen good test scores. So in a nutshell, what I want to say is you have come to the right place and you are in good hands. So no worries, okay? So let's get started. Okay, so during our last class, we went over 4 umbrella SAT rules that I told you to kind of remember and constantly use, because they're going to guarantee you a higher test score come test day. And I can't emphasize that enough, so we're going to go over them one more time, okay? The first one was be active readers. Come test day, you're going to have a million passages, a million sentences, a million questions to answer. And 1 hour into the test, you're going to start feeling tired, nervous, hungry, stressed, everything, right? It's inevitable for us to start skimming over these words, skimming over these passages. I can't emphasize enough. Make sure you stay attentive, stay active, on the lookout. I want you to keep looking for context clues, keywords. Follow the tone, follow the passage, follow the purpose, everything. Just stay active and be on the lookout for the different clues that the test maker has out there. Yeah, they're trying to trick you. The SAT test makers have made this test very tricky, but they've also put in those clues to get you on the right track. They have given you these little hints, these things that'll guarantee you to get the right answer. So it's a hard test, but it's not really that hard if you know what you're looking for. So I want to emphasize, just be on the lookout and stay active. Be active readers. Okay, second tip. Predict the answer. You want to be able to predict an answer, kind of formulate what the blank could be filled with, what this question could potentially be looking for. And if you're active readers and you've successfully read through the sentence, looking for clues, looking for context clues, being on the lookout, then this should be very easy. You should have already formulated a general gist of what the answer could potentially be. And then so when you actually look at the answer choices, you'll save a lot of time because you'll be looking for something already. You'll already have an idea of what you're looking for, which makes the hunt a lot easier. So make sure you predict the answer, and that kind of just follows through with active reading. If you actively read, trust me, an answer will be able to be predicted. So just kind of follow those rules. Tip number 3, you want to make sure that you use process of elimination. You are given several answer choices, and you want to make sure that you can eliminate some, because even eliminating one answer will increase your odds of getting the right answer, right? So predict the answer choice and then use process of elimination. So look through each answer choice. You already have a general prediction, so you know what you're looking for, but kind of go through, try each answer out, and then eliminate the ones that don't work, okay? Hopefully you'll narrow it down to just one answer, and then you'll have your answer be good to go, okay? All right, final tip. You want to make sure that you keep calm and carry on. And I know you guys have heard this before. It's been parodied and it's been used over and over for a lot of different things. But keep calm and carry on is also applicable to the SAT. So what I mean by this is, yeah, you'll actively read, you'll predict an answer, you'll narrow your answer choices down, you'll use process of elimination, and then you'll finally hopefully get to that one answer choice. However, sometimes this is not always the case. There might be 2 answers, or there might be 3 answers. You may not have narrowed it down enough, and you're kind of stuck. Okay, what do? You don't pry through the question using precious time. You have to be able to keep your calm, don't get stressed, stay collected, and then just move on. This one answer, one question is not going to hurt you, but missing future questions that you could potentially get to if you just leave this question be will hurt you. So you want to be able to have that self-control and be able to let go, and then just keep your calm and then carry on, okay? So we'll go through a rundown real quick again one more time. And these all are encompassed together. They work together, and that's how you kind of get that answer, get that high score. So start with active reading. Be on the lookout. Look for context clues. Look for keywords, things like that. If you do that, if you do it well, then you'll have a general prediction of what the answer could potentially be. So then when you're scanning through the answers, you can easily eliminate the ones that you don't need. And then finally, you'll narrow it down to hopefully one answer choice. But if that's not the case, it's okay. That happens. Just be able to keep your calm and then carry on to the next question. Okay? All right, hopefully these tips will help you. Jot them down, remember them, practice them, and then you'll have a higher test score. Okay? Okay, now that we've gone over our basic SAT tips and tricks, let's try and apply them to our first set of verbal questions, the SAT sentence completion questions. Okay, so the sentence completion questions are a test of your vocabulary as well as your reading comprehension. So the question statement is going to ask you to choose from a variety of answers that best completes the sentence when 1 or 2 words have been omitted. Now the topics can range from a variety of things that you may have encountered or you may not have encountered, but honestly that's really not going to help you here. What will help you is knowing the strategies to solve these type of question problems, and those strategies are what I'm going to teach you today. So bear with me and let's get started. Okay, so for homework, you guys are supposed to kind of go through section 2, page 390 on your own, and hopefully practice looking for context clues and keywords and things like that, and then hopefully you guys were able to come up with a couple of the right answer choices. But if you guys weren't able to, that's completely fine, because today we're going to work through this together. We're going to practice actively reading and practice looking for these keywords, okay? So don't worry if you didn't catch them the first time, you'll get them this time around, okay? All right, we'll start with question number 1. The blank of Maria Irene Forn's play Mud. A realistic room perched on a dirt pile challenges conventional interpretations of stage scenery. So after reading this, what sticks out at you? Me, I see dashes, okay? I don't know if you guys noticed these dashes, but in the English language, these dashes are kind of like a red flag. Especially in the SAT, these are going to be like a red flag for you. This means to kind of stop and read again, because dashes serve a purpose of redefining or reiterating something that had already been mentioned. So if you think about the placement of these dashes, they come right after the blank. So you kind of need to make that connection that these two must be somewhat related, or why else would the author put a dash statement in the middle of a sentence if it served no purpose whatsoever? So If you read again, a realistic room perched on a dirt pile. What does that define? If it's relative to the blank structure, it must be defining something. And when you read that statement, what do you feel? What does it describe? And it describes kind of a surrounding and an environment, a placement, that kind of thing. All right, so kind of just keep that in mind when you read on, okay? This is active reading, kind of remembering what you're reading and being keen to the clues that are given. So after that, we move on to challenges conventional interpretations of stage scenery. Now, after kind of reading that dashed off portion that was relevant to surroundings and scenery, that kind of thing, we're given another clue, and it's stage scenery. It's kind of repetitive, isn't it? Like once you notice one thing, you're more keen to notice the other clues that are given in the sentence structure. So stage scenery is actually another key word. So you have a couple key words now. You have stage scenery and you have a realistic room perched on a dirt pile, which all kind of encompass the general surroundings, scenery, that kind of thing, description of environment, that kind of thing. So you must kind of make that connection now, that the blanked word that's missing must have something to do with stage scenery or a realistic room perched on a dirt pile. So after actively reading, we're able to make that connection and we're able to make somewhat of a prediction. We can predict that this blanked word that's missing must be relevant to scenery or surroundings, something like that. So let's keep that in mind as we move on to the answer choices and we use process of elimination. Okay, so using process of elimination, we're going to go through each answer choice and kind of see which ones work and which ones don't. Okay, and we already have a prediction, so this should be a little bit easier. We're going to look at number A, letter A, and it says appeal. What's appeal? Appeal is more of how the audience or the reader responds to whatever statement is given or the play, how we react to it. Now, was that even really mentioned inside the sentence? I don't think so. It really wasn't. So I think that we're pretty confident that we can eliminate that answer choice. So we're going to cross it off. Okay, then we move on to B, plot. Plot covers characters, themes, climax, the sequence of events in a story. Now, was that really touched on during this sentence? I don't think so. So I think we can easily say that that can be eliminated. So we're going to eliminate that. Then we move on to mood. So what is mood? Mood's kind of more of a tricky one, especially when you're reading novels, and I'm sure in AP English you've experienced this too. Mood is always kind of difficult to kind of decipher because you have to kind of read deep into what the author wants you to pick up on in the story, that kind of thing. Well, mood isn't really covered. There's nothing regarding how the author feels, the tone of the story, the tone of the play, the neutrality of it. Is it happy, angry, sad, that kind of thing? None of that was covered. So we can easily say that that can be eliminated. Now we're moving on into D. D is setting. Now setting. Is there something mentioned in the sentence? Are there keywords that have anything to do with setting? Hopefully you guys didn't say no, because there are a lot of keywords. All of our keywords have something to do with setting, scenery, surroundings, that kind of thing. Stage scenery, a realistic room perched on a dirt pile, those all have to do with setting. So I think we've kind of gotten our answer, a good gist of what our answer could be, but we don't want to make that rash decision yet. We want to kind of save this on the side, put a question mark next to it so we can come back because we know that this is a possible answer, but we're not done reading all the answer choices yet. So you want to finish the answer choices and then we'll come back to it if that is still our best answer. So we're left with E, rehearsal. Rehearsal. Rehearsal is what's practiced before the actual act. Rehearsal is something that isn't mentioned in the sentence. So I think we can eliminate it. Nothing based on a rehearsal, nothing relevant to that is ever mentioned in the sentence at all. None of our keywords refer to that at all. So I think we are confident enough to say that we can eliminate that as well. Now, lucky for us, we've eliminated all of our answer choices except setting. And even more coincidentally, setting is what one of our predictions were. We predicted that this blank must have something to do with scenery, setting, surroundings, something like that. So that conjunction, that relativity, makes this answer the most possible and the best answer. And I think this is pretty okay for an answer choice. What do you think? All right, so hopefully setting works for you. Now put it back into the blank statement. The blank of Maria Irene Fornes needs to be changed to the setting of Maria Irene Fornes playing mud. A realistic room perched on a dirt pile challenges conventional interpretations of stage scenery. I think that sounds pretty good. Okay. Okay, you guys have been doing amazing. So just bear with me for a couple more questions and then we'll be done with the sentence completions, okay? So let's look at question number 7. Read with me. It's, by the end of the long, arduous hike, Chris was walking with a blank gait, limping slowly back to the campsite. Okay, so by now I think you guys are pretty good at actively reading and looking for context clues and things like that, so I'm sure a couple things probably just shot out at you and you guys were able to pick up on them. If you're anything like me, you probably noticed long and arduous, and you know that adjectives are always good keywords, okay? So let's look at long and arduous. Long, arduous basically means long is lengthy, arduous is difficult. So we're talking about Chris who's hiking, and this isn't a very fun, it doesn't seem like a very upbeat hike, an upbeat sprint or anything. It seems like a very dragging, very difficult hike. So it's not positive, it's more negative. So let's keep that in mind as we move on, okay? Alright, so then he's walking, and then he has a blank gait. And if you guys don't really know what gait means, it's a way of walking, it's a locomotion, that kind of movement. So simply said, it's another way of walking, so a blank walk. So he's already going through a long, arduous, difficult hike, and then now he has a certain type of walk. So this blank is going to be describing his movement, alright? Then we move on, and then we're hit with limping, slowly. Alright, so these are also actions and descriptive words, but he's not running, so they correlate with our previous long, arduous. So long, arduous, hike that has a very slow limp to it, okay? So he's not going very fast. The stream of things seems very, very negative so far. So we're going to keep that in mind, and then we're going to make somewhat of a prediction. We know that we have to get a word that kind of fits this context. A very negative, slow, descriptive word that describes his movement, all right? So then we look at the question types, and we're going to use some process of elimination that you guys are pretty pro at this point. Let's go with letter A, halting. So what is halting? Halting describes slow, frequent stops, staggered, that kind of thing. So when we're describing his movement right now, everything's very lengthy, very difficult, very slow. So I think that this word actually might fit for the given blank that we're looking for. But we're not sure yet. We don't want to make this rash decision yet, so we're going to kind of put that in the back, put a question mark next to it, and go back to it later. Then we move on to B, robust. Okay? Robust means big, bulky. I don't really think that his walk is going to be very big and bulky, so I think it's safe to say that we can eliminate this answer choice. Okay? Alright, so then we move on to C, constant. So constant is a type of time, a pace, a speed. It's describing something that we're actually kind of looking for because we're looking for the type of walk that he has. So it might be relevant, it might fit. So kind of initial scan, we'll just keep it. And we'll put a question mark next to it, and then we'll go back to it. Alright, then we go to D, prompt. Prompt means on time. That really doesn't have anything to do with the sentence, being on time. It has something to do with time, which we're looking for, because his stance could, we've been talking about long, lengthy, slow, that kind of thing. But honestly speaking, prompt really isn't relevant to what we're looking for here. It's not going to describe the type of walk that he has. And even if it did, in terms of time-wise, we already know that it's a very negative slope that he's going on, and prompt doesn't really fit that context. So I think it's safe to say that we can eliminate it. So coolly, eliminate. Alright, and then we're hit with E, facile. Alright, come across E, facile. What does facile mean? It's not a very common word that's been used, or that is used from day to day. So you might not know what it means, but it means easy, okay? Easy really isn't following the context of the sentence that we have, because we have something negative, and then easy is very positive. And the author will always try to do something like that. The test makers will always put something that's completely irrelevant, completely antonym to that, very opposite. So this is kind of more of a distractor, and you can just eliminate. So right now, when we go back to our answer choices that we have narrowed down to, we're left with halting and we're left with constant, A and C. Now put these back into the blank and see which one fits best. Right now, halting, walking with a halting gait, limping slowly back to the campsite. okay, that really does fit because he has a long, arduous hike, you're tired, and then you might have a staggered, a very slow-paced gait or walk. That's going to add to the limping slowly back to the campsite effect. So this seems very, very, very complementary. It seems like it'll work. But then we also have constant that we're not too sure of either. So we're going to put constant into the blank. And by the end of the long, arduous hike, Chris was walking with a constant gait, limping slowly back to the campsite. Constant, I don't think, is the best answer here, just because if someone's tired, someone's going on this long hike, and he is potentially hurt if he's limping, I don't think that their pace is going to be a very constant, pace at all. So I don't think that's really going to be the right answer, so I think I'm going to eliminate that. So we're left with A, halting, and hopefully that's what you guys have as well, and that you guys are okay with that. Any questions? Congratulations, you guys have made it to the last section of the SAT class today, and that is the passage section. And what this section is basically just a test of how well you can read passages and then answer the questions appropriately, which sounds like a very, very easy task, but honestly it's one of the hardest parts of SAT, just because there are certain things that you need to pick up on. There are certain clues and things and purpose, tone, things of the author that you need to pick up on, and if you can't pick up on those things, then it makes answering the questions very, very difficult. So here we at the Princeton Review are going to be able to teach you those strategies to be able to pick up on these things and be able to answer the right questions and get the right answers. So bear with me and we'll just jump right in. Okay, so if you go on page 391, we're confronted with our first dual passage, and basically what a dual passage is two different passages, one topic, and then two different authors. So obviously when you see a dual passage, you should automatically think, hey, there's going to be a difference, there's going to be a contrast. Questions are going to be based off of that too, because you have two different authors, and then they're going to obviously come from different viewpoints. If they have the same viewpoint, then that would kind of make this passage a little pointless and the questions that you're answering a little bit repetitive. So there's going to be a difference. There's going to be something that you're going to be comparing, something you're going to be contrasting. So remember that when you attack these kind of problems. Alright, so we have a dual passage, and so we're going to jump right into the questions because I'm sure you guys already did your preliminary scan for homework. And that's basically, like I mentioned, you just want to spend a little bit of time on these passages. You don't want to spend too much time digging in like you would a textbook. You just want to quickly look for the keywords, the cues, things like that, and then kind of get a general gist of what each passage is talking about, what the purpose is, and what the tone may be, and then kind of just jump right into the questions. So if you have any questions, raise your hand and I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, so question 10, it says, the author of passage 2 would most likely respond to the last sentence of passage 1. Immediately, we're given a comparing situation, just because they're telling us author passage 2 is going to respond a certain way to the passage 1. Which means that you want to automatically think, okay, so what was the difference between the two passages? Alright, so keep thinking about that. Then you also want to look into the question stem itself, because the question stem and a lot of the passage problems are going to give you cues, different clues and things like that for you to answer the question appropriately, kind of foreshadow what's about to come. And so being familiar with each question stem is going to save you a lot of time as well. If we look at this question stem, it says, the author of passage 2 would most likely respond to. Respond to is kind of signaling reaction. How would the author of passage 2 react to that of passage 1? So we already know that we're going to be talking about a contrast, but then there's going to be a reaction behind this contrast. There's a reason why he's reacting a certain way to that of passage 1. So we want to think about that. So then that kind of foreshadows, and we can predict what the answer choices may potentially be talking about, or may potentially have. And that would be a variety of different kinds of reaction cues, reaction words. And so when you look at the answers, you actually are confronted with a bunch of reactions, suggesting, observing, questioning, noting, arguing. Alright, so we want to also think about, passage 1 and passage 2 and the respective reactions that you receive from those passages, what the tone may be. Passage 1, we get a very positive, upbeat, that kind of thing, because he's thinking very highly of these dolphins, that their intelligence is very much like our own, much like humans, which is speaking very highly of mammals. Then you go to passage 2, and this author's a little bit more reserved than that of passage 1. He's kind of questioning, he doesn't know which side to take, but then ultimately he takes a stance of neutrality, saying that you can't really know until you, and that all intelligence is just kind of different. That kind of thing. So you want to think about their different positions and then try to attack this question. So when you look at the answer choices, you're given all these different options, and then you kind of go across and you come across answer E. And answer E is automatically you see arguing. Now, we know that we're talking about the author of passage 2 for this question. Yeah, he's reacting to that of passage 1, but ultimately it's all about passage 2's author. Okay, so we know that passage 2 author isn't very extremist. He's very neutral. So by saying that he's arguing, does that seem appropriate? I don't really think so, because arguing is a very extreme, very fervent word, and it doesn't seem very appropriate to what we're looking for. So we can clearly just eliminate it, all right? So then that leaves us with 4 options, a little bit easier to work with, and before we even look at the rest of the questions or answers and even look back into the passage, we know that we can eliminate one question, which kind of increases our odds a lot. So now we're left with 4 different answers, and their reactions are very neutral. So we kind of are here at a stalemate, and then we kind of end up having to look at the rest of the answers. So now we can jump back and kind of go back and forth and try to see which ones, and use the process of elimination to eliminate the ones that really don't work. So we're going to start with A, suggesting that intelligence in animals is virtually impossible to measure. Okay, so when you answer the rest of these questions, you know that this question is based off of passage 2, the author of passage 2. So we're going to focus on the details of passage 2. For me, automatically, I would look at this answer, impossible to measure, virtually impossible to measure, and kind of eliminate it. Why? Is because it's very extreme. I know that passage 2's author isn't extreme. He never made anything extreme, any extreme remarks or anything like that. So to say that something's virtually impossible to measure, to say that he would react because he believes that something's virtually impossible to measure, is kind of a very far-stretched statement, and it's very inappropriate to that of author passage 2. So I would eliminate it. But if you're not feeling the same way as I do, then you obviously want to go back to the passage and kind of verify if the details are true to what the answer is saying. And when you go back, in the first sentence of the paragraph, you kind of are hinted that this is not a true statement, because he says that dolphins have large brains, but we know that brain size alone does not determine either the nature or extent of intelligence. So he's acknowledging that their intelligence can be measured, but he does say that the brain size isn't enough to measure intelligence. So he's not completely denying the fact that the intelligence can be measured. Intelligence cannot be measured. So this would ultimately be wrong. So we can eliminate answer A. All right, then we move on to answer B, observing that intelligence does not mean the same thing for every species. Very, very neutral statement. And then in the end, it gives you a detail. So the only way to prove that this detail is right is to kind of go back to the passage and see if he mentioned anything of that sort. So we know that the very last sentence, he says, until we know more, all we can say is that dolphin intelligence is different. Okay, so what is that saying? In another sense, in another word, in another way, he's saying that intelligence does not mean the same thing for every species. So that seems kind of true, seems kind of right, and so we're going to leave it. But we don't want to stop there, because we want to finish and make sure we answer and go through all the answer choices, because like I said before, the SAT likes to trick you and may give you answer choices that are a little bit better than the one before. So we're going to keep going. All right, so answer C, questioning the objectivity of the studies already conducted. All right, so the SAT likes to do this. It likes to give you details that you've seen before and then kind of have you replay them, and then the familiarity of it all kind of confuses you, and then it makes you think that you've seen it, and so therefore it must be the right answer. When you say questioning, where have you seen a question before? When questioning refers to a question. And in passage 2, you see, hey, first sentence is a question. And automatically you might think, oh yeah, he is questioning. But then you have to really dig deep and really look at the rest of the passage, because he starts off with a question, but he doesn't necessarily question the objectivity of the studies already mentioned. He doesn't mention anything about that. So therefore, that is a faulty use of detail. The SAT likes to confuse you like this. There's nothing ever mentioned about the objectivity of the studies being questioned. So therefore, you can eliminate that answer. Finally, we go on to answer D, noting that dolphin activities do not require a high level of intelligence. Okay, so once again, the SAT likes to use details that you've seen before, that you're familiar with, and likes to trick you to think that, hey, this is the right answer because I've seen it before. Of course, it must be the right answer. But if you really think about it, where were dolphins' activities discussed? If you look, it was discussed in passage 1. Now, we aren't talking about passage 1 at all. We're talking about passage 2. We're talking about the author of passage 2's response. So, we want to focus on the details of passage 2. So by seeing that there were activities of dolphins mentioned in passage 1, automatically that triggers something in our brain to think, hey, this must be the right answer because I've seen it before. But then you want to really think about it. This was never mentioned in passage 2. Author of passage 2 never mentioned anything of this sort, and therefore this is a really irrelevant statement. There was never anything noting that dolphins' activities do not require high level of intelligence. If anything, passage 1 said that their activities prove that they have more of a high level of intelligence, but there was nothing of activity mentioned by the author of passage 2, and there was obviously never anything mentioned about how activities weren't or do not require a high level of intelligence. So that's kind of just the way that the SAT likes to trick you to think that you've seen something before and therefore it could be a potential answer. So don't get tricked by that, and then you just want to always be active. You always want to know what you're looking for. You want to know where you're focusing on, what you're focusing on. So that leaves us with answer B, and that's observing that intelligence does not mean the same thing for every species. That was mentioned in the last sentence. Until we know more, all we can say is that dolphin intelligence is different, and then that actually has a lot to do, and it relates to the last sentence of passage 1 that we're actually focusing on as well, which is the reaction of the author of passage 2 to that statement of this behavior demonstrates that dolphins are aware of their own individuality, indicating a level of intelligence that may be very near our own. So it's all very relative, but ultimately answer B seems to be the right answer, and therefore we're going to leave it at that. Okay?